my friend actually had more problems than I did. But what she had was hope. There's also power in using your life to encourage another person. It brings out strength and it brings out wisdom. It brings out compassion. Cancer, the big C, you're going to die. But I think because of having gone through that battle to really awaken to Buddhahood, the fear, that challenge did not last very long.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Hi, Cassidy from Buddhability here. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe. It'll help the show out, and you'll never miss an episode. If you want more Buddhability content, you can subscribe to our email newsletter in the link below. We put out great content every week. Enjoy the show. All right, welcome to Buddhability, Victoria. It's so good to finally get to see your face. We have been trying to schedule and reschedule in this very busy month, so thank you so much for taking your time. But I always have our guests introduce themselves, so you can just share a little bit about who you are and maybe a little bit about like your origin story, your life growing up.
Okay, so I'm Victoria Smith, and I live in Kenner, Louisiana. I'm a part of the Houdat Nation. I was born and raised in Roselle, New Jersey, with the
Oh.
nuclear family of mom and dad and
Hmm.
an older brother.
Mm.
I went to college at Yale in New Haven, Connecticut, and
Oh.
probably from the time I was 12, set out on this journey. One, I
Mm.
wanted to be a diplomat. And so I
Wow.
studied lots of languages and I went to Yale actually to I was a Near Eastern languages and civilizations major because I was going to be a diplomat. And then
Wow.
two, I was born and raised in a Black Southern Baptist church in New Jersey. And
Mm-hmm.
at a young age, had some questions
Mm-hmm.
and began a spiritual journey at age 12.
Mm.
I was very fortunate that my
Wow.
parents were understanding of that. I wanted the
Mm.
faith that they had, but the philosophy didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Wow. Was there something at particular about age 12 that was like, oh, okay, I'm ready for these two avenues in my life?
Let's see. I am an avid reader. Like I'm more than avid.
Mm.
Like I'm a passionate reader. Like I devour
Mm-hmm.
books. And
Mm-hmm.
so about age 11, 12, I had read myself all the way through the children's section in my local public library. And
Whoa.
I was on the hunt for stuff to read. And actually, my mother
Mm-hmm.
loved 60 Minutes. And one Sunday
Mm.
we were watching 60 Minutes, and there was a group of Christians somewhere in the United States that was burning
Mm-hmm.
books. And my mother just started laughing. And she said, Christians burning books is such a silly concept because there's more sex, drugs, rock and roll in the Bible than any other book. And so I had a Bible on my bookshelf and I said, let me read this. And I
Mm.
read it from cover to cover and I had
Wow.
questions. One of my questions was about the Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel,
Mm-hmm.
and Cain kills Abel, and Cain gets banished into the wilderness, and he wanders and he finds a princess. And so I was
Mm.
in a whole nother kingdom. So that didn't make a lot of sense to me because there were only two other
Mm-hmm.
people on the planet according to the Bible. And so I
Mm-hmm.
asked my minister about
Mm.
this question, and he did, I think, the thing you should never do to a young person. He
Mm.
laughed and he did not
Oof.
answer my question. If he had said it's a metaphor, an allegory, something, that would have
Mm.
made a lot more sense to me. And so that kind of began that journey. And then also, I think as a young person, I was really fascinated and I wanted to understand whether people were fundamentally good or fundamentally evil. Um,
Mm.
and so that also fueled that spiritual quest. Um, so, yeah.
Wow. I think it's so easy to underestimate young people. And it's really incredible to hear that, like, you had questions and you asked them, which is really like not always common. I think it probably says something about like who you are, maybe naturally or inherently. But along that spiritual journey, we'll say, how did you end up finding Buddhism, and what made you say like, oh, I have questions and like I like the answers?
So, let's see. Along the way, from 12 until college, I was studying all kinds of religions. I studied Hebrew with a rabbi's daughter. I had a friend who was Catholic. I studied Islam. Actually, one of a transformational book for me was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And so for a while, Islam seemed like the religion that might answer some of these questions for me. Also, it just never made sense to me that there was so much segregation in people worshiping. So it was like the Black Baptist church, the Vietnamese Catholic church, the this. And so I was always looking for this. I felt like we should all be worshiping together. Um,
Yeah.
and so I did a junior year abroad in Cairo, Egypt, and it
Wow.
was amazing. It really showed me that I really am of the US and American culturally,
Yeah.
but one of the things that it really made clear for me was that there's a separate sphere for males and females in Islam, and that was like, oh no, that just didn't work for
Yeah.
me. And so I kind of came back to the United States to start my senior year, dealing with like, wow, I don't think this was the religion I kind of thought I was going to do. And I don't think that's going to work. I also really struggled with pretty significant depression that actually started in my senior year in high school. And it was just something that I was always battling. So kind of got back to New Haven. I had felt like, I'm just dealing with this depression thing. Um, Islam is not going to be it. And it was August of 1989, and a friend of mine who had just been introduced to Buddhism in New York and hadn't really started her practice, she moved to New Haven and she took me to this Buddhist meeting. And I walked into someone's living room and I heard people chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and also chanting sections from the Lotus Sutra and what we call Gongyo. And I immediately, like, it just resonated with me. So I immediately start trying to do it, not really knowing what I'm doing. And then when we finished the prayers, I don't remember to this day, Cassidy, what people said or what the topic was, but I just felt in these people's lives this happiness that I had been seeking. And it wasn't happiness because they won the lottery or they had lots of money, because I could also tell in that room there was socioeconomic diversity, there was racial diversity. There were black people and white people and Asian people, and there were young people and older people and all in between. And I just felt like there was this part of me that felt like this is what I've been looking for. Um, but at the end of the meeting, someone asked me if I wanted to, I guess, continue more in this practice, and my negativity came roaring out, and I decided it was a cult. Um, and So then I told my friend, please don't ever, ever tell me anything else about Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and this Buddhist organization. And
Whoa.
so for the next 2 months, I watched her life. And she had many different
Mm,
challenges. But what I noticed was she always had hope. I had all of
mm,
the external circumstances. I'm at a great college. I've traveled the world. I have loving parents. I have not worried financially, but yet anytime I hit a challenge, I was just sunk into
mm,
depression. So,
mm,
2 months after that meeting, I am in this just horrible suicidal depression. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, you need to call Jennifer. You need to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And
wow.
so I went to her apartment. We chanted for an hour. And it was really the
Mm,
first time with these depressive episodes, I just have to let them pass. Like, and I would
hmm,
just cry and I'd be, it was like just darkness and despair,
mm,
and I would just have to let it run its course. And that
mm,
time that I chanted 1 hour Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with Jennifer, it was like I was in this dark cave, but someone lit a match. So it wasn't totally
mm,
illuminated, but there was hope. And so
mm,
I began to chant. That was
mm.
October of 1989. And I started my own practice in December 10th, 1989. So almost 37 years ago.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I love the imagery that you have of like you're in this dark cave and someone lit a match because I think it's so yeah, I feel like describes so beautifully like the like hope that kind of comes
Mhm.
out of our lives when we chant. And to your point, it's not always like, wow, I chanted and now like I'm out of the cave and I'm
Right.
never going to see that again. You know, sometimes you chant and you feel that way and that's incredible. But every time I chant until I feel that little glimmer, you know, that
Yes.
spark of like, ah, okay, whew, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I feel like I can keep going. You
Yeah.
know, like that is really remarkable when you're feeling discouraged. And I think, especially when you're like struggling with mental health in any
Hmm.
capacity, because that can always feel like, for many folks, I'm going to feel this way forever. And like I'm
Yes.
doomed to this. And it's just this trap, right? But to have, even in the moments of depression or anxiety, oh, just a little like, okay, there might be an end to this, right? So, you know, I know that your journey with depression continued on after you
Hmm.
started practicing, but also led you to really like deepen your understanding of yourself and of Buddhism. So I'm wondering if you can tell me, yeah, just what it was like the several years after you started practicing.
Yeah. So it was, wonderful benefits and this feeling of hope. But it's depression. There's a long history of mental illness in my family, and depression it's a chronic illness. And so I think at the beginning I was really chanting that, like, okay, I'm going to never ever feel depressed again. And that will mean I'm a good Buddhist. And I've chanted really,
Yeah.
like, I've transformed, right? I've
Uh-huh,
transformed
you get
this
your A
karma.
plus.
A plus,
Yeah.
because I've chanted
Mhm.
enough, I've done all the right things. And then
Mhm.
I would have a period where I would feel depressed. And
Mhm.
that would make me just feel like, oh gosh, well, maybe I've just got to chant more, or I've got to just
Mm.
do more things or be a better Buddhist, because somehow it just means
Mhm.
I haven't won over this yet. But we
Yeah.
talk about no prayer goes unanswered. So I was like, okay, I just got to keep going. I had moved to Louisiana
Mhm.
after medical school. We didn't even get to there. I became a doctor,
Oh
which
yeah.
was which was actually like this huge benefit, to be
Wow.
able to believe that I could
Mm,
make this radical change and become a doctor. I'd gone to medical school in Boston, and then I moved down to Louisiana. And I remember there were definitely points where like this depression would just rear its
mm,
ugly
mhm,
head. Um,
mhm,
and I was helping to lead or facilitate a study group for
mm,
women in our Buddhist organization. And
mhm,
we were studying about um, our president Ikeda, who was the Soka Gakkai
mhm,
International
mhm,
president. We were studying the New Human Revolution, which is his
mhm,
fictionalized account of
mhm,
how this organization spread from
mhm,
Japan
mhm,
throughout the
mhm,
world. And so in volume one, he talks about this first trip in October of 1960, where he visited the United States, Canada, and also Brazil. And so in Brazil, he's describing an encounter with this woman who had had just really horrible things happen. She and her husband had emigrated from Japan to Brazil to be farmers. They had children, and then her husband dies. She does not speak Portuguese. She now doesn't have a job because they were on a farming contract. She's got young kids, and it is at her point of despair that she's introduced to chanting Nam
mhm,
Myoho Renge Kyo and introduced to this fact that she can transform this and have hope. But she feels like, oh, it's this heavy, heavy karma. And so she
mhm,
asks a question at this first meeting in Brazil with President Keita about changing this heavy karma. And he really talks about the fact that, the challenges that we have are challenges that we have taken on to be able to show others that we can transform them. And so instead
mhm,
of thinking like, oh, I did something bad or
mhm,
uh, that, so I have this challenge, it's like, no, it's actually a sense of mission. So I have this
mhm,
challenge to be able to really show others that they don't have to suffer with it. And so
mhm,
what I realized was I didn't have to get rid of depression. That was the
mhm,
sort of the karmic mission that I took on in
mhm,
this lifetime, but I did not have to always suffer with it. And so
mhm,
then I could really use it to encourage others who also struggle with depression, because maybe half the
mhm,
population of the world has depression or
mhm,
anxiety, that yes, you can have this, just like you can have high blood pressure, or you can have cancer, or you can have a financial problem, but you can absolutely transform the suffering
mhm.
into something of value for yourself and others.
Yes. It's such a like different kind of way to look at our problems. And I, in my own kind of experience with anxiety, yeah, for so long I was like, felt like, oh, I'm just gonna suffer with this kind of forever. And of course, it's like shifted in so many ways. And I think I've, through my Buddhist practice, been able to like transform a lot of the ways that I like think about myself and
Mhm.
the way, like all of these things that have really helped me navigate having anxiety. Like, it's not that it doesn't exist anymore, but it's like, oh yeah, there's my old friend. Like,
Mhm.
all right, we're
Yep.
gonna we're gonna move through this rather than allowing it to like just totally consume my life.
Right.
And to your point, it can apply to anything in our life, but like any, physical ailments, anything like that. So from that point, did you feel, yeah, a big shift, or did it feel like, over time got clearer?
I would say big shift at that point, but then continued to get
Hmm.
clearer. I
Yeah.
mean, it was almost like this aha moment, sort of like that first
Huh.
chanting, like, okay,
Yes.
this this
Wake up.
match is like a wake up call,
Mm,
this like opening of the eyes, this
mm-hmm,
realization. So then I could begin to process it differently. So, like you said, like
mm,
anxiety is your friend. It's like I know depression is my like good old friend
yep.
that
Mm-hmm.
when I've maybe not been caring for myself, like getting
Mm,
enough sleep, getting enough exercise, eating properly, chanting enough, then I know that my old friend is going
mm-hmm,
to be there and talking
mm-hmm,
in my ear.
mm-hmm,
I know what she
mm-hmm,
sounds like. She's very
mm-hmm,
derogatory and she's not the
mm-hmm,
nicest friend to have. But I
mm-hmm.
know when I start to hear her, then I know, okay, this is not a moral failing. This is not, I'm a bad Buddhist. It's
Mm,
just a sign of my life state is
mm-hmm,
lower than what I want it to be. And
mm-hmm.
so there are things that I can do to raise
Yeah.
that, to quiet that voice, as opposed to just succumbing to it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. It's about, our internal life. So I know we'll be talking a lot today about maybe the last 5 or so years of your practice where, we just talked about one kind of, or maybe two different little like turning points, the match. But I know in around 2020, that year was very big for you and transformative. So maybe we can dive into that if you want to start. Like, what was your vision for the year? Any kind of realizations you had leading up to that year?
Okay, so 2019 it ended just very traumatically. Um, I was really feeling a lot of depression, a lot of just not valuing my life. And it really hit me that so much of my life up to that point, I had really sought external validation to say, I'm a good person. I've gotten straight A's in school. I'm doing well at my job. I've gotten this accolade and that accolade. And that year, and it was a little thing, but near the end, I got a eval that wasn't stellar. It wasn't horrendous, but with all the stress that was going on at work and depression, it just threw me for a loop. And I really, like, I was crying all the time. I was depressed. And as I'm chanting about this, I realized, oh my gosh, you don't believe one of the fundamental tenets of Buddhism, which is that you're a Buddha, good, bad, and indifferent, with everything. And that really sunk me into more of a depression because I thought I practiced 30 years at that point. I supported others in faith over those 30 years. And I just felt like a hypocrite. I felt like, what have I been doing for 30 years? But in this practice, we really talk about never giving up. So I I felt miserable and horrible, but I kept chanting because I was like, I can't, after 30 years, feel this
Yeah,
way, right? So it's like
yeah.
something's got to shift. And as I continue to chant about like this disbelief in my own life and my life as a Buddha, it became clear one of our wonderful tenets in Buddhism is that everything begins from this moment on. That the present moment is the most important moment that determines the past as well as the future. And so I just said, well, you know what? It really doesn't matter if I haven't gotten this understanding, and not understanding here, because I understood it here, but in my whole being, I realized I didn't. And so I began 2020 with this determination that I was going to chant to really break through any delusion, illusion, darkness in my life that stopped me from fully embracing the fact that I was a Buddha. And I love to tell people that doesn't mean sparks come out of your head and you levitate, but that you can really freely tap our your unlimited wisdom, compassion, and courage to be able to deal with the inevitable obstacles and challenges in life. So I just determine, okay, I'm going to chant to really break through whatever it is in my life that was stopping me from seeing that.
For someone listening that's like newer to Buddhism, actually, I just had a friend ask me this weekend. She's like, everybody's saying like, I chant for this thing, I'm chanting for this goal or to break through this thing. And then she said, what does that like mean? Like, are you repeating the same thing in your head the whole time when you're chanting? So I'm wondering, like, if you can just kind of share for you personally
Mm-hmm.
what that looked like, that kind of internal dialogue, what your life was feeling like as you started chanting that way.
In this Buddhism, our chanting is about a vow. It's about making a determination, not begging some external deity to give us something. So as I was chanting, it really was like, okay, I must manifest. I must awaken to who I already am. I'm fully endowed as a Buddha. So, but I also know I've got this crud. We all have fundamental darkness and fear and negativity and cowardice. And I've got all of that. And so it was a sense of almost like, let me polish my mirror so that I can really see my true self. So there's this crud on the mirror. So kind of felt like that imagery. I'm also I'm not a violent person, but I like violent imagery. So I also kind of saw myself like cutting
Mm,
through, like almost like I'm going through
mm,
this jungle of
mm,
weeds that are
mm,
stopping me from seeing this beautiful garden that is my
mm,
life. And so I saw myself with a sword and a scythe and I'm cutting
mm-hmm.
through, but it really was just this sense of it's here already.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just have to like awaken it so I
Mm,
can really perceive on the cellular level who I already am. And
mm,
during that process of chanting that way, there was also a lot of study involved. And so
mm-hmm,
reading the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, the 13th
mm,
century Japanese monk who first chanted Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, also reading a lot from President Ikeda. I consider my mentor in life.
mm-hmm,
And so I also thought back over my 30 years of practice and I thought,
mm,
who's been telling me that I'm a Buddha for 30 years? And that was
mm-hmm,
Daisaku Ikeda. So
mm,
it was also like really like studying his writings,
mm,
current and
mm,
past, um,
mm-hmm,
like with a deeper sense of like, okay, let me arm myself also with
mm,
weapons to win over this darkness that is
mm.
stopping me from seeing who I really am.
Mm, wow, I love that so much. It, like just hearing you, I'm like, wow, I really want to go chant like that right now. But I love what you shared that I think is so crucial for people to recognize is that it's awakening what is already in your life.
Right,
We are all already Buddhas.
right.
And it's yeah, like really an internal battle to really believe and see yourself that way, and to your point, like not just the intellectually understanding it but really live your life that way. So as you're, yeah, chanting that way and thinking of yourself like knocking down the woods. um,
Lightsaber,
we,
Star Wars, yeah.
yes, exactly. As you're like having this kind of like internal, fight, Of course, we know that year is 2020. Everybody listening was, yeah, alive at that point. So, how did, yeah, just like facing this global pandemic and so much like kind of, um, maybe I'll say like reckoning in the
Hmm.
United States about like power and race and, money, all of that. How did having that in your environment like work while you're trying to have this internal kind of battle?
Yeah, so there was definitely a lot going on. Because as you know, I'm a family physician, so it was like
Oh yeah,
on
oh my
the
gosh.
front lines of this pandemic, dealing with this like enemy, right? That can, at the beginning, you're like, we don't know what's going on. Just the fear of like going to work. And then if somebody comes in with it, can I bring it home to my family? I have two younger, I mean, sons who are adults, but I take care of a lot of seniors. So it's like, okay, if they're not taking care of themselves, can I take this and give it to other people? So it was a really scary time, but it was interesting to be able to be going through this sort of internal revolution at the same time that there was this global revolution going on. Because one of the things that was so powerful was President Keita during that time. I don't think he, in some ways, I don't think he was saying anything different than he had said over the many, many years of encouragement, but it hit differently. And so he was encouraging us to really chant for the quickest end to the pandemic. And I felt like he kept saying over and over again that we're bodhisattvas of the earth and Buddhas, that we have this mission to transform the world and to awaken to our power. And it's our mission to awaken other people to the majesty of their lives. My other name for Buddhahood, majesty of your life, right? And so I felt like that was so empowering. So it's like I'm chanting to empower myself internally, but then also hearing that encouragement helped me to feel empowered in the world. They were kind of united battle. So two things. One is because of this deepening my conviction in my power as a Buddha. And I do want to share this one quote that is actually the theme of the human revolution. President Keita wrote, "A great human revolution in just a single individual will help achieve a change in the destiny of a nation and further will enable a change in the destiny of all humankind." And so that was also something I was really reflecting and chanting on. So, one of the things that came out of that prayer and being in the middle of a pandemic was that my vow that somehow I will take action to end the pandemic. And so understanding science and understanding viruses and knowing that you don't come up with a cure for a virus quickly. It can take years, decades to do that, but vaccines can slow down that spread. And so I volunteered to become part of a COVID vaccine trial. And with that sense of one person can make a difference. And I reflected on like other vaccines that we have or medicines that we have that people were part of trials to prove the safety of that so that we could all benefit. So it was like, okay, as a fully endowed Buddha, this is a way that I can make a difference. And I also knew as a Black female physician, I knew that, okay, we're going to get to a point where we're going to be able to offer a vaccine to all people. I don't want to be a hypocrite talking to my patients about taking something that that I haven't taken myself, or even been part of the development of. I also know that, the US has not the best history when it comes to treatment of people of color in all areas, but especially in healthcare. And so I also knew it was going to be important for me as a Black female to say that I was part of these trials for my patients as well as the world. And so making this vow that I'm going to make a difference, I was able to become part of the COVID vaccine trials at my health system, and I was asked to be the media patient. And so I was blasted all over internationally, actually, on NBC, CBS, ABC, BBC, like being interviewed. The photo of me receiving my COVID vaccine, it was like, wow, just the answer to that prayer. And I had colleagues who shared with me, because of me being part of the trials and doing it, that convinced them to receive the vaccine.
Mm.
I spoke in many places, small community groups, just many places, to use my own example as a
Mm.
model. So there was that. And then also, as we talked about reckonings, there was the
Mm-hmm.
murder of George Floyd in July. I think it was July of 2020. Time is so
Mm-hmm.
relative. I remember just feeling, I'd been chanting to feel so empowered, and I really felt like I'm breaking through. And then I see this, and I remember that just sent me that day. I just wanted to break down and cry that whole, the whole day that the video had been released. And I actually determined that as soon as I got home from work, I was going to reach out to a friend in faith to get encouragement. And as soon as I drive into my driveway, I get a call from another member in our organization, and she is also going through, just she's crying, she's hysterical, she's of African descent, and I have two sons, she has sons. So I remember just thinking, like, okay, I just told her, like, I'm not sure what to tell you because I'm feeling the same way, but let's talk through this, let's encourage each other. And so I listened and I shared what I was feeling. I thought about the example of our first and second presidents of the Soka Gakkai, who were imprisoned during World War II in Japan for their beliefs in the absolute dignity and respect for all life. And our first president, Tsunesaburo Makaguchi, died in prison, and his disciple, second President Jose Toda, was released from prison at the end of the war, and he was filled with anger at the fact that his mentor, you know, died in prison. And he determined to get vengeance. But his vengeance was to eradicate misery, was to spread this message far and wide that people's lives are full of unlimited potential, and that everybody's life is worthy of respect. And so I remember telling this sister in faith, let's get vengeance, but let's get vengeance by eradicating misery, by battling the 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 thoughts, the tendencies, the attitudes that led to George Floyd's murder and many other people's senseless loss of life. But I feel like that came also from that prayer to really awaken to my own Buddhahood and the Buddhahood of everybody else.
Wow, this is like very timely for me because I've just been, these past couple of months, I started out the year like, yeah, let's 2026, and then just pretty quickly very disheartened by the, state of the world. But hearing that for you, the ability to like take action, encourage others, and keep going really comes down to that deep prayer to recognize the greatness of your life and the greatness of other people's lives, the potential for Buddhahood in everyone. Because I think if that can't be shaken, then we can always move forward in that difficult conversation that ended up being, refreshing and redetermining. Were you able to maintain that sense of determination and hope, or was it something that fluctuated?
I mean, I think in that conversation, it definitely started with us. She was in the pits of hell, and I was right there with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Like, it was like I'm,
Yeah.
I'm trying to like not go there as well. But to be honest, like at the beginning of that conversation, I was right there with her. But I think that there's also power in using your life to encourage another person. It brings out strength, and it brings out wisdom. It brings out compassion that if I had just stayed in my own bubble of suffering, I would have reached out and I probably would have heard some encouraging words. Um, but I think it was more transformative to be in that life state, that lower life state, and have to pull myself out to encourage another person. Because in that act of pulling myself out of that that world of hell, it rocketed me to bodhisattva, that heart to encourage another person. And it was through awakening again to that I the wisdom to think about President Toda's example, to think about the power of believing in the human revolution in one person at a time, over and over and over again, to also go back to the idea that we should rejoice during challenging times. So, another thing that helped me in 2019, there was a lecture that President Keita had written about this transformation from deploring to rejoicing. And for the longest time, I would just talk to everybody like, okay, we need to rejoice. We need to transform. Like, whenever we're deploring, it's because we feel like the problem's bigger than us, or we're angry about it, or we're in suffering. But we can transform from deploring to rejoicing. And in this lecture, one of the things that I loved about President Keita, he says, for example, as human beings, we cannot choose the times or society into which we are born. Reality can be so cruel that we may lament the state of the world and question why we have to live in such a corrupt, degenerate age. Such deploring reflects a mind controlled by its environment. But human beings, no matter what their circumstances or how difficult their environment, can live lives on a completely different level by transforming their deepest attitude or state of mind. That is the profound transformation from deploring to rejoicing. This is what happens when we become actively engaged in the movement for Kozen Rufu, or this widespread declaration of respect and dignity for people's life. And he just also says, he says, the key to this great transformation is an awareness of our mission as a bodhisattva of the earth. And then I love this. He says, we change from people who seek help from the Buddha to people who work alongside the Buddha to help others become happy. And then when we awaken to the fact that we're bodhisattvas, well, we also awaken to the fact that we're Buddhas. And so we don't have to feel victimized by circumstances, and really being able to stand as protagonists means that I feel like we can unlock this creative potential in our lives. Because when we feel hopeless, we have blocked all the creativity. We've just said, it's impossible, there's no hope, there's despair. But when we're like, I don't know how we're going to transform this, but I have the power, you have the power, we all have the power to transform, then creativity blossoms and flows from our lives.
It's one of the like beautiful things about Buddhism is this, yeah, like openness to possibility,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like so many times I'm chanting and I think, like I can't see a way forward. And then through the course of chanting, I'm like, wow, there's this way and this option and this way to think about it. Feels like, sometimes I'm turning on a faucet of
Hmm.
like all of my like creativity. I think it's such a crucial takeaway maybe for people that are feeling this kind of sense of like closed off, it's hopeless, recognizing that like actually that is going to stop everything. So one thing I'm really curious about is after that, 2020, maybe leading into 2021, that um, battle that you're waging to really believe in your life. Have you felt a shift since like going through those kind of bigger, really disorienting, maybe like battles?
I would definitely say yes. And it's been like this prime point to always go back
Mm.
to when maybe I'm suffering or challenging or dealing with a degenerate, corrupt age. And in 2022, the battle to believe in my Buddhahood, and then also to become more active in trying to help other people awaken to their Buddhahood really was perfect for one of the biggest battles that I had to face, which was being diagnosed with breast cancer on May 3rd, 2022. And so that there was definitely fear um, at first of like, what does this mean? I mean, cancer, the big C, you're going to die, all of that came out. But I think because of having gone through that battle to really awaken to Buddhahood in 2020, the fear, that challenge did not last very long. And so I can really say going through breast cancer was one of the best things that has ever happened to me. I was able to deepen
Wow.
my heart of appreciation for just life itself, like deepen my heart of appreciation for like just all the protection in the universe that I had, like the support of friends and family and other Buddhist members and colleagues. And like, I know that's because of the many causes I had made over years to support others, but also it just came from that heart of appreciation. And I also realized, like President Keita has written that, a person whose heart is full of gratitude is a person who's happy. And so I was like, okay, I want to be happy. And that's also something like, you know, I feel like constantly chanting for to to awaken, to continue to polish that heart of appreciation means I can be happy no matter what is going on.
Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, I find like for so many people who practice Buddhism, things that to others seem like, wow, that's devastating. That's so horrible. And like, yes, it's very difficult, but I think it helps us become like more connected to our humanity and
Hmm.
connected to life. Because when we have these like really difficult moments that have us reflecting on life itself,
Right.
like it's very rare, I think, for most people to want to like really just dig in, like let me face mortality. But then like that, because of Buddhist practice, can like, yeah, deepen appreciation for life, which is really remarkable. And I think many people might think like, wow, that's crazy. I don't know if I could really feel that way. This is like a recall back to the beginning of our conversation about depression,
Hmm.
right? Like I can actually be the happiest while I'm going through this treatment. I can be incredibly happy and think, wow, this was an incredible thing that has actually happened to me. Um, so, oh man, I have maybe a different piece of advice question than I had originally thought, which is for someone that is in that kind of make or break moment, like, oh, something just really devastating happened. And it might be hard to hear, like, this can be it'll be a great thing for you. You know, what advice would you give them for being able to, like, uh, transform it and really create value from it?
Wow. So first, I would say like being able to chant to determine,
Mm.
first of all, one will be victorious. And
Mm.
you'll to like I felt like as I was chanting about cancer, it was about winning myself, I determined I'm
Mm.
going to have even better health. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but I'm going to
Mm.
have better health. But I think also a key to transforming suffering into something of value is to also determine to use it to encourage other people.
Mm.
And so that can be hard sometimes when we're in the middle
Mm.
of something. We can feel like,
Mm.
how could I be encouraging? Like, I'm going
Yeah.
through a divorce. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have money. I have all of this. But just like going back to our beginning, my friend Jennifer actually had more problems than I did. But what she had was hope. She had this belief that it could be better. And so that was what was so encouraging. And so I think also as we're going through challenges, to always remember that how we go through something can be really encouraging to another person. And so that we can determine, like, okay, not only am I going to transform this for me, but I'm going to use my life, which is what mission means, to use my life. I'm going to use my life. I'm going to use this suffering to encourage other people. And that I also think helps transform it from deploring to rejoicing. A year after I was able to win over cancer, there were three women in my sort of Buddhist organization, local, who developed breast cancer. And I was able to use the experience to really encourage them that they were going to be victorious. And yes, it wasn't going to be easy. And yes, chemo sucks. And if you have surgery, like, not to say, like, oh, there's not going to be any problems, but you can be happy going through that. And as I was chanting, going through it, I really determined, I thought about many other Buddhist members, President Ikeda, who had gone through very significant illness. And I thought they were so encouraging to me as they were going through the illness because they never let the illness take away their hope. And so they were still always brilliantly shining. So I think that when we can use any of our problems to recognize that even in the midst of the deepest, darkest suffering, we can use our lives to encourage others. I think that helps transform it faster. And then deepening our conviction that we will be victorious.